All right, everyone, I do believe that we are now live, but give me a moment because, as always, I've got to check over here, make sure we're live, number one, which we are. Mute it, number two. That's very important. If you don't mute it, then hearing yourself speak 5 seconds after you've said something, not usually the most entertaining thing in the world. By the way, and this is a funny thing, this is something that I have a gripe with Google on this, and it used to be the same with Hangouts. If I'm looking over here, I look just fine. But if I'm looking over here, I'm mirrored. And so I'm seeing everything in reverse. Like I'm seeing a mirror image as though I was literally looking in an actual mirror. It's pretty funny. And by the way, El Papa de los Helados is there. Everyone should subscribe to him, follow his Twitter because it's fucking hilarious. Yeah, we got a lot to talk about today. But one thing we got to talk about first. Links are in the description to my page on BitChute and also on Dailymotion. I am very, very close now to 60,000 followers on BitChute. If you're only following my YouTube channel, you're only really getting half the story. I will be doing BitChute exclusives fairly soon. I'm also now within the top 750 users by subscriber count on Dailymotion, which is a significant increase over yesterday. In the wake of advertising the fact that I was there. I do ask that you all create an account there and follow me. You don't have to interact with the material regularly, but every little bit helps. And it helps me to have more clout on the platform so I can't be censored, which is sort of precautionary when you really think about it. Anyway, I've actually got to open up, and I didn't bother to put this on the other side, which sort of sucks. So let me resize this and sort of get it off centered underneath my actual camera, since I don't need to pay attention to chat here if I'm looking at it on the side. I do have today's subjects up here. I only have like a list of subjects. Now we got Sanders' climate change plan first. We got to talk about Greenland, mostly for humorous reasons. We might as well throw Inslee in. And also David Koch dying. Out of respect, I'll use this term. I'll say Koch instead of David Koch. But he was old. I think it was mid-70s. He finally keeled over. I didn't bother to put it in the title because I don't want to make a major fuss about it. I'll do a video on it tomorrow, like my thoughts about his neoconservatism. It's funny because one of his last significant acts, for which he'll be remembered before his death, was that he and his brother partnered with George Soros on the issue of internet censorship. How fucking funny is that? So he goes from being 90% a sellout, like helped to found the Libertarian Party, quickly abandons it in the early 80s with his brother, and they go off to do other like neocon shit. They realize that neolibdom gets them more money than actual libertarianism, even if it's more Ancapistan style. They realize that the government can be bribed to fuck their smaller competitors, and then they become more like a George Soros. So it's really funny. Anyway, I'll talk a little bit about that. We've also got Ebola update for anyone who didn't see this morning's video. There are 2 new cases of Ebola, South Kivu province. It's not geographically that far from where it was before in Goma with North Kivu, but it's significant because one of those infections was person to person in a hospital setting. So I believe an aid worker actually was infected, so that's not good. Anytime you lose a medical professional, it's 100 times worse than losing just a regular person too, because it leaves you one more person short in the fight against Ebola containment. Then we might as well talk about the Amazon fires. In fact, I think I'll start with the Amazon fires, to tell the truth, because it's all anyone's talking about right now. For once, I don't have coffee, I just have regular water. By the way, you might hear some vacuuming noises in the background at any given time. Not sure when. They should be mostly muffled. There's soundproofing in the bedroom for a reason. That sounded wrong. But yeah, we'll talk about the fires in the Amazon first. Right now, an inordinate proportion of the Amazon rainforest is on fire or fire prone because of an extended drought in parts of it. This has turned into a political circus. Now, if you look at the Amazon rainforest, I'm going to tell you something within soil science that few people know. And if you've been a subscriber for a while, you may have heard this term, terra preta. Terra preta is the idea of impregnating soil with charcoal. With charcoal, usually finely powdered. And over time, it mixes with the soil, makes a carbon-rich stratum in which plants grow more easily. It's very biotically active, potentially. It takes 1,000 years to break down under normal conditions. There are huge deposits of it in the Amazon. And some people have speculated that human use was responsible for this. I'm willing to speculate the possibility of a joint venture between humans and nature literally starting forest fires, realizing that that led to more growth of certain crops thereafter. I'm willing to bet that those deposits are at least partially natural. I do not believe that forest fires are indicative of the fact that mankind is evil. Fire suppression in the world, a la humanity, like controlled fires in order to burn away underbrush and clearing out forests and chopping away dead old growth, suppresses fires. Humans attempt to suppress fire when possible because it rages and destroys things. It's fairly natural. There have been forest fires and shit like that before mankind existed as a species. That being said, does that mean I think nothing should be done? No, of course not. Things should be done. Attempts should be made to try to keep the forests healthy. You don't have to be hippie, trippy, social justice warrior. You don't even have to believe in climate change to care about the issue. Deforestation was an issue long before climate change became a mainstream topic in the modern sense. Like I can remember when I was a kid, it was deforestation. That was the major issue. It was deforestation and pollution in the sense of like toxic waste dumping, stuff like that. Not CO2 emissions. You're like, well, the CO2 levels are rising. Yeah, okay, big whoop. The plants literally breathe CO2. I'm not sure what the fuck your problem is, but the plants don't breathe in mercury sludge. And if you cut the trees down, that's a problem. I do believe that we need to reduce our impact in this world. I am an environmentalist in the classical sense. I don't care about climate change as an issue, but I do want to live in a clean world. We should reduce pollution any way possible. Bolsonaro's response has not helped. Let's be 100% brutally honest. I don't have a problem with Bolsonaro. I don't see him as like, he's responsible for the Amazon fires. No, not really. But his response sucks, which is that he's sparring with other world leaders who are expressing concern. Like Macron came out, Macron's an egotist. He came out and said, well, our house is on fire. Well, it's not your house. France doesn't run the Amazon rainforest. I believe that there is one tiny chunk of it that is French territory. By and large, it's Brazilian, Peruvian, and Colombian. There's some in Ecuador, I think a little sliver of Bolivia, and a bit of Venezuela. And Guyana has some, although isn't southern Guyana, there's actually a little desert there, isn't there? I think it's on the southwestern quarter of it is almost desert because of weather patterns from the mountains or something. But anyway, it's funny. Macron came out, he was trying to antagonize Bolsonaro because he's like the radical centrist of our time. And he wants to be like a legit world leader. And Macron really has emerged as one of the major faces of Europe, really. But it's unhelpful. At the same time, Bolsonaro then sparring with people that are expressing mere concern. I'm concerned about it. Does Bolsonaro have a problem with the idea that maybe Brazil should scale back its intent to carve off chunks of the Amazon rainforest? That does affect the entire world. It may be Brazilian territory. Nobody's disputing that. But the wanton use of it will destroy Brazil too. You've seen legendary amounts of flooding, partially due to deforestation in some of these communities. At some point, the economic impact in the negative sense becomes greater than the positive impact of logging areas off and farming them. China has seen this. Brazil, ironically enough, should take a leaf out of the book of China. Cut off the head of the snake before it gets to that point, and you end up having to have a 10 billion tree reforestation program to save face. They're talking about building skyscrapers that absorb smog just in order to have a clear day in Beijing. And you've got these other countries that do have a lot of territory, a lot of arable land and stuff. You need to use it wisely, though, because if you don't, you can get fucked completely. It can become a real big problem. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on the Amazon fire, basically. I'll go to a chat here for just a minute. I'm going to pull this back so that I can sit in a more comfortable position here. Greenland would be excellent to cut off China from Arctic trade. Here's the thing. I don't want to cut off China from Arctic trade. I don't see why anyone in the United States would want to do that, since it would cause a recession here, at least temporarily, while we did. Cattle farming. Yes, a lot of people are under the impression, this is a good comment from a prudent paratrooper. A lot of people have a tendency to believe that the Amazon is being cut down for corn crops and stuff. No, a lot of it's cattle farming. Honestly, a lot of the loss of forests in the world have to do with livestock. Here's where vegetarians, after a fashion, kind of sort of have it right. It is more efficient for a lot of our resources to come from plant life as opposed to coming from animal feed. I don't think that we should tag. I think that it's all education. There's a difference between having a good steak and like scarfing down 5 burgers a day. I know the joke is Americans can't get enough of that, but I mean, honestly, there are some people that eat a lot of meat, and it's very water intensive too, because plants are required to feed the meat and create it. It's really funny. Why are cows more profitable than pigs? I don't know. Bacon is tasty. I guess chickens and fish are supposedly more efficient for usage of resources. I don't know. What are some main differences between classical liberalism and libertarianism? It depends on who you ask. A lot of classical liberals, I think, would look at libertarians as being on the right ideologically, and they look at themselves as not necessarily sharing that. I think, like a Sargon liberalist or something, but I'm not 100% sure. Digital Man X1 understands his 80s Wendy's reference there, I see. Trump's recent tweets on China. I don't know what tweets you're referring to. Basically, though, you can go to Trump's Twitter any day and you can laugh. That's the best thing about it. By the way, again, for anyone who's just joining, there are links in the description to this live stream, whether you're watching live or not. You understand, to Dailymotion and BitChute. Please join me on one or both. I'm approaching 60,000 subscribers on BitChute. That's a huge milestone. The only one other person who's hit it is Sargon of Akkad. The clankers must rise up and retake BitChute as a platform. On Dailymotion, now easily within the top 1,000 users and very, very quickly rising. The higher you go, the more deference you get on a website usually. So I'm trying to cement my place there. And yes, David Koch is dead. That is one of the 2 legendary Koch brothers. I call them the Koch brothers for totally innocuous reasons. They partnered with Soros right before this dude fucking keels over, which I think is the funniest thing ever. And the vacuuming has started, thankfully, due to soundproofing panels. Not a big problem. I'm going to go through here. I think I saw a couple comments here. Just a second. Yeah. By John Brown, how do you keep up with current events? RCP is an excellent aggregator. You can definitely pay attention to YouTube political commentary. Sometimes you see stories that you wouldn't otherwise see. 4chan. Google News is arguably good if you know what to look for. If you have different things that are interesting to you, like I look up news on Venezuela, the Ebola epidemic, things like that on a daily basis just to make sure I don't miss anything major. I'm a news junkie a little bit. It's just the way that I am. And I know some people, they're not, and so they can't understand. They're like, oh my God, how do you do it? And it's like, well, if you're interested in it, it's one thing. It's a little different. By the way, another update actually that I have is that I'm about to complete the 240th literary work, the edited work that I've been working on. It is an important grimoire, a full-length work. It's going to be over 200 pages when it's finalized. It's similar to the Petit Albert. It's similar to the Grand Grimoire, some of these other legendary works. It's less well-known, but it's easily just as much worth reading. I can't wait to release that. It'll probably be within the next week. I think I'm 2/3 or so done with the editing process. Some of it's in shitty condition. And I was lucky to even be able to obtain this edition of it. So it's taking a little longer than normal work, but I can't wait for that. For those of you who are interested, if you look up the Tarl Warwick Books blog, you can find all the edited works I've ever done. And I've also authored some as well. I'm still partial to Sickness in Hell. It's an actual fiction, full-length story. I'm going to be reworking it. There are a few spelling errors in the document. Sorry, folks. Yeah, get a copy now, because once I change to a new version, those will be artificially scarce or something. It'd be funny if someone bought a bunch of copies of their own book, took it off Amazon, and then like sign it and sell them. And be like, oh my God, you can't get them anymore. They're limited edition. I'm sure that some people have done that. Yeah. When will Biden drop out, you think? Oh, this is the sort of thing within politics that I love, because the unpredictability of it is sheer. I can't answer the question. I don't know if he will. Biden might be insane enough. Like, let's say he's so demented, he's too far gone to realize he's got dementia. And the other people around him are like, well, it's harmless. You know, either he won't win, or if he does, his wife can take over or something. And they're just letting him run. Imagine such a weird situation. How do we know that it's not? You know? Advice for anyone who started a new YouTube channel recently: get a BitChute channel. No, I mean, I'm being entirely serious. Branch out beyond YouTube. The problem is that if the algorithm marks your material as edgy, until you hit a certain, I think until you hit 1,000 subscribers or something, you can't even become a partner. At that point, you get a little more deference, but it's a long road, a long, lonely road to get there. It didn't used to be. It used to be a lot easier. Hitting that first threshold at least would have been easy. It used to be a lot harder to hit 100K though if you got going. If you get going, you can reliably grow on YouTube. But in order to get to that point, if unless you're being sponsored by a big name, you get discovered like PewDiePie shouts you out or something. Largely, you're going to have to rely on other platforms to popularize your work. That's just the way the algorithms have begun to work. It suppresses people. It shouldn't. I mean, it should be. YouTube, fundamentally, there was nothing wrong with how YouTube operated in 2015, but they've decided to change a bunch of things. Let's see. Did it really used to be that easy? It was easier. Yeah, absolutely. Trump has always wanted the spot on the $20 bill. Yeah, that'd be funny, but presidents can't be on money till they die. The only thing while they're alive, I think that they can be on is postage stamps, if I remember correctly. So yeah. Do you like black metal? Yeah, although they haven't made a lot of good black metal in the last decade or so. So. Anyway, I'll get back to a couple of the main topics here. Let's talk about Greenland because I know that people have a lot to say on this. The way Trump trolled the world with the Greenland suggestion thing was funny. When he tweeted out there and it had a picture of a big golden Trump tower in like a Greenland village. It's like, I promise not to do this to Greenland if we buy it or something like that. And that was really funny. It is possible. Here's the thing. It is possible for the U.S. to buy Greenland. There's no law against it. And when people say that it's a crazy idea, to remind them of Seward's iceberg, remind them of the fact that the U.S. purchased Alaska, and at the time it was considered expensive and a worthless chunk of ice. They're like, why are you buying this? From the Russians at the time, ironically. I bet they wish they had kept it. Why are you buying this giant chunk of, taiga and tundra with no resources and a little arable land? Like, there's nothing there other than the fur trade. There's nothing there, and you're spending, all this money on it. Then they struck gold, and they said, oh, well, thank goodness for Seward. And then much later, they strike oil, and now it's the gift that keeps on giving. It was one of the best purchases we made. The other was the Louisiana purchase. Now, of course, the two aren't 100% equivalent. I've seen some people say that, but the Louisiana purchase was largely unexplored land at the time that we were buying, whereas by the time that we bought Alaska, at the very least, the exterior parts of Alaska, we knew what was there, and we knew it was inhospitable. And it is inhospitable land for the most part. I mean, the warm months, you go up there, people tell tales about sparrow-sized mosquitoes, and I have a feeling they're not exaggerating by a huge amount. Like gigantic-ass mosquitoes, and there's fucking brown bears everywhere and weird shit. Back then there was diphtheria, and then they have Balto, and that was a funny story. But anyway, let's say that Trump hammered out a rudimentary deal to pay everyone in Greenland to vote to join the U.S., to petition for annexation or something. I would support such a deal. Yeah, anything that expands U.S. territory, I think, would be a good idea. Even if, again, Greenland largely, it's got natural resources that can't be exploited by the Danish, because there's one part, environmentalism making them unwilling to do so, and number two, the economic capabilities are simply not there. Denmark is a very well-developed country, very literate, very rich per capita, but how many people are in Denmark? How much manpower is there? There's no will to extract the wealth of Greenland. And then, of course, with the glaciers melting off of Greenland, it's going to become a bit more arable. It'll be like the medieval warm period. We'll be able to have little villages on the southern coast of Greenland probably within the next century. It is possible to extract resources from that particular landmass. But, the people of Denmark aren't going to do it. I think, look, it's obvious the globe is warming. It's going to keep warming. And that is true. It is warming. I just don't think it's entirely man-made, and I don't think it's particularly a threat. I think that there are natural feedback mechanisms that'll compensate for it. But while it's warmer, we might as well enjoy the fact that we're capable of doing something up there. And we should let's leave something behind that'll get inevitably coated with the next mile-thick sheet of glaciers to remind people in future generations there was a human presence there. Let's just take some fucking statue and bury it in a big iron sphere in Greenland just to leave something behind in case a world-ending asteroid hits. And it'll be like the one remnant of the human race that's still there. And it'll have made in the USA printed on its neck or something. That'd be an excellent troll of the handful of survivors a million years later when they redevelop the concept of archaeology. That'd be funny as hell. Yeah, I'm still. I'll go through chat a little bit. Do you watch South Park? No, I've watched a few episodes years ago that were okay. They were better when I was on drugs. South Park was funny. Now that I'm sober, not as much. That's the way it is with a lot of stuff from back then. South Park, The Simpsons, SpongeBob. SpongeBob is basically stoner humor now. Yeah. From Restless Nomad, favorite authors, James Blaylock, who actually is still a professor. I emailed him and he actually responded, which was I got almost giddy. He wrote the Elfin Ship, the Bologna books, the Bologna series. Very good. Very, very good. Yeah. Somebody's reptilian research redux. Drugs? Yes. Yeah, I used drugs many years ago, including ones that the Democrats don't want to legalize because they're still cowards. And that's another thing I should do. I should just fucking make a video and ramble for an hour about what fucking sellouts the Democrats are. Oh my God, we want to keep people out of jail for simple possession, but they just talk about marijuana all day. What about people for simple possession of heroin or something? So people that are using the drugs that are actually addictive, they get fucked, in other words. It makes no sense at all. Have I done a China video for tomorrow? I'll look and see if there are any sub-issues for the China thing. Yeah. By the way, again, now that there are almost 2,200 people watching, I think, links in the description to Dailymotion and BitChute. Please join me on both of them because, of course, BitChute is branching out into streaming. There are good things happening there. And on Dailymotion, it's become a mission of mine at this point, sort of like the ICQ thing was years ago. I want to be big on Dailymotion. I want to show them up and say, look, my content is legitimate. Fucking leave me alone and let me keep making it. And the only way to do that is through negative reinforcement, potentially in the future. That requires a big audience, large amount of audience participation. So it's a show of force to prevent censorship. It does work. It's worked before. Is Puerto Rico a net loss for the USA? No. Absolutely. If we admitted them as a state, all that debt could be absorbed and privately dealt with. We could do a lot of developing there, and pretty soon we'd be the masters of the fucking Caribbean, but there's no willpower in the Republican Party to do it. The Democrats don't seriously put it forth because they like having this captive population of people who aren't quite beyond territorial status, so they can ramble about evil colonialism. And the Republicans are worried it'll become a Dem stronghold and put a bunch more Democrats in the House. Who fucking cares, though? But especially if you get a Republican president, that's the time to admit Puerto Rico as a state. It's the size of Connecticut. It's got about the same population. It's potentially solvent. The problem that they have is specifically the result of their territorial status. I find it very funny as well when people who are whitest nationalist types say, well, Puerto Ricans, you're admitting all these non-white people to the U.S. They're already citizens of the United States. It's a U.S. territory. They have free travel already. I can go to Puerto Rico. All I need to do is show my driver's license, get on the plane, and fly to Puerto Rico. I can buy a home there. I can move there. I can do whatever I want. Someone from Puerto Rico can do the same thing. It's just the way it is. Much like with Samoa, Guam, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. These are all under territorial status. Of them, Puerto Rico is the only one that's large enough and populated enough to justify turning into a state. Guam, you can kind of make that argument. But Samoa is very, very small. The U.S. Virgin Islands even less so. And there's not a whole lot of way to solve that status dispute. Why don't we admit Puerto Rico and let Hawaii gain independence or something? That'd be funny. Yeah. It's funny because the governor, isn't it? The governor of Puerto Rico is a progressive Democrat. that he just got in trouble for a bunch of scandals with regards to, I think, saying like mean things about other people in politics or something. And he's one of the people who wants Puerto Rico to stay in its current status, I think, if I remember correctly. Not entirely sure. There are different left-wing factions there, and some support total sovereignty, some support U.S. admission, and a lot of them want to keep the territorial status. I think we should unilaterally eliminate territorial status. We should pass it. We should use Congress, pass a bill, no more territorial status. You're a U.S. state or you're on your own. If you're on your own, you're going to pay that debt back, and it's going to be on our terms, because who's going to help you? Let some other country can bail you out. Let China bail you out and build a military base there. They can deal with it. That'd be funny. I'm just looking at some comments at the moment. Yeah. Some recommended works for a beginner getting into occultism. Occultism for Beginners by William Dower comes to mind. If you're interested in grimoires, that is the dark magic spellbook tradition, you can't go wrong with reading the Grand Grimoire. Homan's Powwows would be another one, and the Petit Albert, which is a French work. I've released an English edition. There are several others as well. The problem with grimoires, if you're interested in that side of magic, is that you've got to learn how to separate metaphor from realistic material. Like in the work I'm working on right now, there are alchemical statements that nonetheless are meant to be literal chemical recipes for various purposes. But if you read it literally, if you read it literally, you can interpret it in a strictly magical sense. A lot of the authentic magic of that time that I'm most interested in has to do with animal husbandry and herbal healing. But then there's some weird shit, like read the Grimorium Verum if you get a chance, which goes under other titles as well. There's like one spell where you take a dead man's head, like a dude's been hanged, and you take his head, bury it at a crossroads with beans in its mouth and eyes and stuff, and then bury it and do an incantation, and then like this demon will appear and I guess give you wine or something. It's just really weird shit, and it's obvious somebody was having a good time, I think, designing some of the ritualism you see. But it can be confusing. It's hard to recommend beginners occult works. Like I guess Davies' work on grimoires itself, like literally talking about the works of the occult, might be a good place to start as well. Have you read Manly? Yeah, I own several works by Manly P. Hall, actually. I like his material. I think I like Steiner's material more than Manly Hall, though. Turnips versus beet. I'll take both. Any root crop. I don't think there's any root crop that I don't like. Yeah. Tiger Tan Bear, what's your IQ? Have you been tested? Yes, I was tested years ago. My tested total is 132. I don't know if that's accurate. I have no way of particularly telling. And IQ is an okay measurement for some aspects of intelligence, but I've met people that are supposedly low IQ that are very smart, and I've met people who are supposedly very high IQ who are kind of out there. It's not the only thing that determines your intelligence. And I mean, that could be wrong. On the online tests, it's been as high as the 160s and as low as the 70s. It depends on the day and on the test. I'm like sitting there, I'm like, yes, my IQ is 75. I should go pick some more turnips. I think, what was the cutoff? I can't remember, in older literature when they used, the R word that you're not supposed to use anymore. By the way, YouTube doesn't care, but Twitter does, and they'll ban you for off-site behavior now, so fuck it. What was the cutoff for profound mental disability? And the description they used, I think, was the cutoff was the ability to pick turnips, if I remember correctly. Like the ability to pick root crops out of the ground determined that you had reached that threshold. And it was just like really weird. And it's like there are all sorts of books from that era that politically correct culture would not accept today. But then again, you can be politically totally incorrect, and there's something fucking totally wrong with some of the titles they had. Functional was around 80. Yeah, according to one test, I was like 75 or something like that, which I'm assuming is probably not the case. I think my scores in college show otherwise, but yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's 132. It could be lower or higher. I don't know. Styx, do you make sure to remember the USS Liberty? Oh, yeah, of course. Acts of war on U.S. vessels matter. Of course, some of them matter more than others, but yeah. Yeah, instead of 10.2, it should be 75 IQ or something like that. That would be a fun meme. Where could I send you fan art? For fan art things, actually, I've talked to my web manager, and she's put out, I guess, to send it into the website there through the normal contact form. That's tarlwarwick.net. I think a bunch of other people have sent in stuff as well. Yeah, the Lusitania. I think I watched was it maybe the In Search Of documentary on that from back in the day, back in the 70s, back before I was even born, and somebody was claiming they heard a bunch of explosions like torpedoes hitting it, and then they were talking about their little kid like getting rowed away from the sinking ship and weird shit like that. It must be weird, like even with the Titanic, there's just something weird about the idea of like perishing at sea, like out in the great vastness, like empty ocean. Really strange. Where's my garden gnome? Yeah, some people have wanted me to release like stuff like garden gnomes and stuff. That'd be funny. Oh, do you think birthright citizenship would hold up to judicial scrutiny? I have a feeling that birthright citizenship will be upheld. That the idea is that if someone's born on U.S. soil, that'll be because we've used a civic model for so long. They'll just take it as precedent. They'll say, well, we've been doing it all along, and in order to change it, we would have to erase that precedent. Maybe it'd be retroactive. It'd be a real problem, I think, for people. Styx potato peeler. Yeah, if that one site was correct, I'd be the one peeling potatoes, or maybe I wouldn't even be able to do that. I'd peel my fingers accidentally. You'd have to peel the potatoes. I'll just pull them out of the ground. That'll be the limitations of my mental processing capabilities. What else were we going to talk about? Oh yeah, I touched on Ebola only briefly. There are 2 new cases, and one of them was a hospital transmission. The problem is that this means that there could be more cases that are sort of not symptomatic yet. If that were to happen in South Kivu, if it hits some of the cities that are there, it could spread a lot further. The problem is that they have a treatment now, but they don't have a reliable vaccine for Ebola. That is, there's no active preventative measure going on other than, hey, when you go out, that person that's sneezing and coughing blood, you probably shouldn't shake their hand. That's basically prevention in this case. They do, however, now have a treatment, and even if you're already symptomatic, it will lower, if you're in the final stages where you're like bleeding from every orifice, it'll lower the death rate to about 30%, which is still like smallpox level, and it's not great. It lowers it to like 20-something%, a little bit lower if they get it when you've got flu-like symptoms. If you get it early, though, like you're exposed to Ebola, you're not symptomatic yet, and they give it to you before symptoms appear, it lowers the death rate to like 6 or 7%. That's a marked improvement. The problem is finding people that have been exposed and getting them that treatment early. The other problem is the ever-present possibility of mutation, and this is what is not being discussed. We know that the last Ebola epidemic was the result of a mutation that increased the ability of the virus to live outside of the host. We know that to be the case. They declared this to be the case after the epidemic was over. We then found out it was due to a second mutation that the epidemic ended so suddenly. A version of Ebola that was asymptomatic began to spread from person to person. It partially is an STD, they then told us. And people had Ebola, but it wasn't symptomatic. It was inoculating them and giving them immunity. It thus inoculated, vaccinated people through nature from this particular disease. It's, by the way, very funny. I don't see the anti-vaxxers worrying about the fact that an Ebola epidemic was stopped by an asymptomatic variant spreading through nature. Very interesting. Some people still say, well, Ebola is caused by the Gates Foundation or something like that. I had, what was it? Somebody recently was sending me like, it's basically Babylon BMO and stuff. They were sending me stuff about how some lab had released both Ebola and AIDS throughout time, and that these were like government super weapons or something. The worst thing is something like that could, in theory, happen. We do have an active bioweapons program. The U.S. less so. Like the U.S. and certain other countries that have full-on chemical and nuclear programs shunned bioweapons, partially because it's so indiscriminate. The problem with a bioweapon is that if you deploy it, like we know that North Korea has a bioweapons program. That's basically a doomsday arsenal. It's worse than nuclear weapons, arguably. And you release, a re-engineered plague that's 100 times more infectious into the world. Not many people are going to survive. It's going to kill 90% of the world's population. Definitely a way to get in revenge for a country that doesn't have the money to have a large nuclear arsenal. It'd be a way for them to have an active deterrent. An active bioweapons program properly administered would be cheaper than nukes anyway. Lyme disease was something that they were claiming. They claimed Lyme disease was engineered as a bioweapon. I've got no particular evidence to think that that's the case. If it was, it'd be one hell of a bungle. Lyme disease, by the way, very common up here compared to some states. Like I think California and Maryland, if I remember correctly, are the big ones. Like that general region. It must have something to do with climate being favorable for ticks or something. Yeah, when AIDS first emerged, people were saying it was a government project gone wrong, or they were trying to kill all the gay people or something. What is your favorite thing about feminism? Classical feminism I support. The idea of women being equal under the law, being able to vote, own property and stuff is pretty sacrosanct. If you're talking about third waverism, it's not even feminism. It's really not. It has nothing to. It's sort of like when people are saying, "Well, I should have the right to strip and down naked in the opposite sex bathroom or something because of trans rights." That doesn't really have anything in common with the original LGBT thing. Again, it's like my video before. People in my generation, when the gay rights movement was at its peak back in like the 90s, early 2000s. It was from the angle of we're the same as you, stop mistreating us. Here's a bunch of people. They're not dressed up with dildos on their forehead and shit and talking about lactatia. They're just saying, look, I'm gay. I've got this person. I love them. I want to marry them and stuff. It's about equal rights. They won that struggle. What happened is that people who were not even part of that struggle now have taken up an opportunistic banner from what's left over from the LGBTQ movement, the gay rights movement, and they're using as opportunists that money and that platform to get attention for other issues that have nothing to do with the initial issue. That's also why among Gen Z, which is being raised with that being the norm, they're revolting against that sort of mentality, and they've given that up as an issue, and now disapprove of they think that they disapprove of LGBTQ stuff. That's how Salon spins it. That's not what's happening. They're forsaking the idea of being very over the top, making that a central focal point of your life and browbeating other people, which I think, by the way, is a good thing. I think it's a good thing that the youth is forsaking that line. I don't care who gets married or what they do in bed, but at the same time, to try to browbeat other people like the bake the cake bigot sort of thing, no, it doesn't have anything to do with the initial issue. I have to go back to work. Thanks for doing this. Take care. You didn't say peace out, though. How very sad. Are you an Invader Zim fan? No. It's all right, I guess. It's funny, though. I did end up watching at least, I think, the first half of the new movie because my niece, who's young, apparently likes it. So I had to sit through part of that. I liked it better when she was into Inspector Gadget, though. Inspector Gadget's better. By the way, the new Inspector Gadget actually is very good. It very much keeps to the original. It's the one they've done. The only change is they're making it 3D now. So it's like animated instead of like traditional cartoon. Other than that, it's very similar. Just slapstick. It's not preachy. It's not getting into weird social issues. It's just about a bungling, Inspector Gadget and weird shit like that. They made his daughter a little bit more like, 90s female spy teenager sort of thing. But other than that, it's basically the same. I enjoyed it. It's all right. Inspector Gadget predicted the laptop. I think by that point there already were technically laptops, if I remember correctly. It's just it predicted that they would be more easily used. It did predict, if I do remember correctly, though, flexible touchpad screens. That I think they did. Yeah. Thoughts on anime? I don't watch it. Military cutoff IQ is 83. Yeah. Yes, Ed, and Eddie was very, very good, by the way. I'm just sort of going through stuff here. From whatever 4690, no, I'm not banned from using super chats. I just don't support their use. I don't care if other people use them. I choose not to because I don't want anyone to have additional free speech just because they pay $1 or something like that. And by the way, YouTube takes most of that money anyway. People are always complaining about that. And then your stream has to live up to an additional layer of standards. It can't be as edgy. Like if I say fuck, probably I can't take super chats. And then people, judging based on the audience here, and I'm not singling anyone out, judging from some of the things that are said, a lot of that super chat money would end up going to the Southern Poverty Law Center, some group that I don't support, because people would use the super chats to say weird shit, and that money ends up getting stolen by these groups that have been chosen by YouTube. Or Correct the Record or the Open Society Foundation or something. No thanks. I'm not going to make any money for left-wing causes. They've got enough money. Yeah. Did we have any other things to talk about? Amazon fires and Ebola we covered. Greenland in brief. Sanders' climate change plan, I only addressed a little bit at the beginning for those that didn't hear it. He's proposing $16 trillion in new spending. And there are people that are dumb enough to think this doesn't mean $16 trillion in new taxes. It's just like with his plan for free healthcare. The numbers only add up, and this is assuming that you read his own campaign literature, the PDF on his own campaign website. In order to balance the budget and make this a zero-sum game, we have to raise the business tax rate by, 3 or 4%, and the marginal tax rate on the top earners to 50% or something like that. If you raise the top bracket, you must raise all other brackets accordingly. This is the way that taxes work. If you don't, you will collapse the economy. Everyone knows this. So what would happen is the government would then have to enact even more taxation or run up deficit or print money in order to give direct subsidies to the lower and working class to zero out the difference. Because otherwise they'd have a huge problem. It may not be a problem for the lowest class, like people who earn almost nothing, but for the working class, maybe even the lower middle class, if you don't want to fuck them over, you have to subsidize. The government would have to take one person's money and give it to them in order to zero out the difference. Well, that doesn't make any sense. The problem is that there's no such thing as free. There's a certain amount of productivity, a certain amount of wealth represented in the country. We represent it in terms of our denominated currency, the US dollar. He wants to take more of it and shove it into certain aspects of our economy, which he wants to totally regulate and deprivatize. I have a problem with this because you're talking about multiple extremely expensive things. You're talking about, number one, $16 trillion for climate change. It's a lot of money. It's a huge tax increase on its own. You're talking about somewhere like $10 trillion for healthcare. You're talking about untold trillions for education, plus many hundreds of billions just to settle up the initial tally of student loan debt. You are talking about fantastical amounts of money over the span of the next 10 years. You are therefore talking about either significant amounts of money printing, inflation, to pay for it, significant amounts of new debt, well beyond the rate. People are saying, whoa, the deficit will hit $1 trillion for the first time now under Trump. Fuck, it'll hit 2 or 3 trillion under Bernie Sanders. So I don't know what the fuck you're talking about being so fucking worried about it. Or you raise taxes. Now it's all well and good to say, well, the top 1% will pay for it. They can't. There's not enough money. There's literally not enough GDP in the top 1% to pay for all this shit. No, it'll affect people like me. We'll be the ones footing the bill. If you're in the 1%, you can offshore your money to the Cayman Islands or something, no problem. Or you can always move out of the country. If you got millions of dollars, then paying the few thousand it takes to renounce your citizenship is a lot easier. You can still own U.S. assets. You just won't be paying a personal income tax at that point. And if you're paying business taxes, Sanders is treating you nicely. He's only talking about a 2 or 3% increase there. For private income taxes, like me, instead of paying somewhere in the 20s, I'd be paying maybe 40%. I can't do that. I can't make ends meet if that happens. I definitely couldn't make ends meet with the high state tax right here in Bernie Sanders' land of Vermont. By the way, flat whites, excellent, highly caffeinated. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. For those of you just joining, again, links in the description to both Dailymotion and BitChute. Please join me on one or both. I will be doing live streams in the future via BitChute probably when that's fully enabled. And on Dailymotion, I'm just trying to become as big as possible on the platform. Just out of principle, I've been banned wrongfully 4 times. Each time I have to go through a rigmarole to get unbanned. It's happened successfully 4 times, but they're really, really a lot faster at responding to you the more people have jumped onto your page there. You failed to give a direct refutation that you murdered Epstein. What are you hiding? Ironically, that's exactly what happens with some people on the right. They assume that the Clintons did it. I don't. I think someone had Epstein murdered. I just don't know who it would be. It could have been the Clintons. It could have been anyone else who flew to the island, or it could be someone who was associated with him and you don't even know they were. Some people say, well, it was Trump. Well, maybe. Should investigate either way, but there's no investigation ongoing. When the FBI says it's going to investigate, yeah, that's a lot of faith in that. Really going to work really well. Oh, yes, the Overstock CEO. That'll probably be a video tomorrow, too. Apparently, he was romantically involved with Bettina, that Russian chick that was spying and trying to infiltrate NRA meetings, and they threw her in jail. And it's like all she did was basically sleep with some NRA officials. She didn't get any illegal info. I don't even know specifically why she would be charged, like the basic espionage charge. But he, I guess, was involved with her to some extent. And so now he released a presser from Overstock, official letterhead and everything, saying that he had been beguiled and he was working with the Justice Department and accidentally helped the deep state and stuff. And the fact that he used the term deep state caused their stock to tumble, so they forced him out. But he's sticking to his guns. I mean, it's not like the argument's any different. He's not saying, well, I recant. I'm sorry I said that. He's saying, no, what I said is true. Definitely, I worked with them, and I realized I was wrong to do so. This is a bunch of witch hunt bullshit. He's corroborating Trump and Bettina both, ironically, but he's still out as CEO. Yeah. Can you speak Dutch yet? I can say a couple of dirty words in Dutch. I can say peck, and I can say, what is it, koet, I think it is. It means, vagina, or something like that. There are some others, but I mean, pronunciation is harder than anything else. Yeah. I think it's, what was it for mushroom? It's like padestol or something. So sometimes to annoy Liz, I'll just combine random Dutch words with a dirty word. It's sort of like I used to do this on ICQ. Like when I learned a few words of Spanish, I would say like sexo con diablos or sexo tu madre or stuff like that, just to piss people off. And so it was like basically sexo con carne, sexo con verde. And it doesn't make any sense, but it's just like you're mouthing off, and I'll do stuff like that. And it's a really great time. Will you do the ghost interview? I don't have any contact at the moment with, I'm assuming you mean Ghost Politics. I'd love to go on his show. I think he ended it though, didn't he? Or something. I can never tell what's happening with the dude. He's restarted and then ended things 3 or 4 different times. It's like, I need my true capitalist radio, I don't know. The beer can sound. What is it? Beercan.wav. Yeah. Yeah, would you go on Joe Rogan? I would absolutely go on Rogan's podcast, yeah. All right. Does the Divine Pymander really date to the BC period? No, absolutely not. It's a Renaissance era work, as all of these Hermetic works are. It's quite old, but it's not from the BC period. That was common, and it's not just which is the Pymander. I think they said Hermes was responsible. I know, but in the antiquated period, a lot of these books attribute themselves to Solomon, Abraham, or Moses, among other characters. Vaughn.live. Yeah, if Ghost Politics, if he contacts me, if he wants me on board something, I'd definitely be willing to. But other people have to do that. It's difficult for me to manage everything. I'm on so many platforms. It's impossible for me to coordinate everything myself. Like, that's why I have to have someone else doing the website. There's nothing else I could do. Yeah, if people can contact Rogan's people and get me on there, I'd definitely be willing. Another thing I'd like to do, I'd like to go on Crowder's show at some point. I think he's hilarious. I know he's had Razor Fist on a bunch of times. Yeah, we would have to go on together potentially, just to prove that we're not the same person. I had him on my broadcast there, though, for the last election. So, although I think he was only on audio and people got suspicious. Pretty funny. Yeah. Yeah. When is your next Rutland adventure? Well, I'm in Rutland right now, but the proper question is, when is the next Netherlands adventure? Stay tuned. Yeah. Have you read Dead Names, The Dark History of the Necronomicon? No, I haven't. I've heard of it. I know what it is, though. The Necronomicon's a fun book. Yeah. How humongous is Big Chungus? Yeah, it's funny. I'll end the stream in a minute, but just get to this. Big Chungus is really funny because it became the nickname for Merlin, one of my cats, because he's on the chubby side and he sort of does look like Weeble shaped a little bit. He's got a little bit more cushion for the pushing, and so he gets pushy, and so he'll try to bull his way onto your lap, and it's like 10 pounds of cat. It's nuts. And then he's got really sharp claws, and he finds it fun. He gets so happy, he just starts kneading. And so he'll grab your feet. Like, you'll just be standing there. He'll come up behind you and reach up and grab your ass and just dig his claws in. And it's like, you want to wear like iron underwear around him or something. Yeah. There will be some cooking materials over time, too. That is something that we'll be doing together a bit. Anyway, I'm going to end the stream, actually, because my voice will go otherwise. A little bit allergies today. I've covered everything here. I will try to do more of these live streams as well. Again, link in the description to Dailymotion and BitChute for those just joining. Sorry, I'm ending the stream right as you're just joining. But it will be fun in due time. I'll be doing more stuff. And I'm going to try to do a little bit more like truly current events with the live streams, like covering things from that day. Usually I do it the day after I give analysis rather than current breaking events, breaking news style coverage. I do more of the latter analysis, which works for me. I like it more. It allows long form more because the stories get fleshed out a bit over time. But yeah, stuff like that. That's about all. Peace out.